Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Serious topic? Let's do it. Disappearing towns, weird restaurants, or creepy gas stations. What's your experience about being in places that shouldn't exist? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Ash Fork and Williams, Arizona, along US 66. Rolled into Ash Fork mid November, needed fuel. I noticed immediately the lack of vehicles or people. Yellow, out of order bags on every pump handle. Finally, find one old style service station with an older white haired fella using one pump to fill up an old farm truck. Ragged old truck, missing tailgate, farm dog in the back, old male driver sitting in his seat, staring straight ahead. Given that all the pumps seemed to be out of order except for this one, I queued up behind the pickup. Guy finishes using the pump, covers the handle with a yellow out of order bag. He produced out of his overalls pocket, hangs up the handle, and straight walks into his service station and flips over the "Sorry, we're closed" sign. Never even so much as glanced in my direction. My arm hair stood on end, and as fast as I could, drove further up to Williams. Wasn't fast enough. My husband and I were headed back north from New Orleans, driving up 59 through Mississippi. We realized that we were going to need gas soon, and decided to hop off at the next exit that advertised gas. I don't remember the exact exit now, but looking at Google, it may have been near Enterprise. The gas station isn't far off the exit on the left. The parking lot is jam-packed, and there's a sign advertising all-you-can-eat barbecue. All the pumps are full, so we pull off across the road to wait for something to clear. That's when it hits us. There are no people around. There must be 30 cars in this tiny lot, most with out-of-state plates, but not a single person was in sight. Not in the lot, not in the store. The combination of the abandoned out-of-state cars and the barbecue sign was a bit much. We just looked at each other, looked at the station, then did a U-turn to get back on the highway and try our luck elsewhere. My great-grandfather's farm for over 30 years. My parents have tried to find it, and everyone they ask who lives nearby goes, "Yeah, I've been there. Don't know what happened to it, though." The ones old enough to remember, at least. It's not just that the farm doesn't exist. The lake it was next to doesn't exist either. The locals who have lived there for longer say they know the lake, but haven't seen it in decades. My mom remembers it. My dad remembers it. My uncle remembers it. My grandpa remember it. It's just that no one's managed to visit it in over 30 years. When I was a teenager, I went on a bike ride with some friends on this gravel bike trail along a river. We ran out of water and were getting really thirsty in the summer heat. So at the next road intersection, we got off to find a store to buy Gatorade. We couldn't find a gas station, but down the road was a parking lot for a store with a Gatorade vending machine outside. We were saved. But we couldn't help but think, what are the odds? We got our Gatorades and headed back onto the trail to get home. A few months later, we drove by that area to show our other friends the random parking lot vending machine that had saved us, but it was gone. So from then on, we referred to it as the haunted vending machine. I was exploring many years ago in New York City, young and wild, and liked to find weird back niches and unlocked doors to vacant parts of the building to check out, which today I wouldn't risk. The innocence of youth. I think we were in Queens, but it was a long time ago. My friend and I found a back staircase behind a Chinese buffet that led to an abandoned second story that gave me nightmares for quite a while. When we walked up, the first thing we noticed was a really weird smell, like a hint of old, stale, rotted meat under years of neglect. It felt incredibly off when we got up there. I don't know how else to describe it. It's surprising silence for being above a crowded restaurant, to the point that we wondered if we were soundproofed. The space used to be a bar or lounge of some kind, with all of the furniture and mirrors piled off to the side and covered with dust. There was also a lot of weird personal items scattered around. Toys, jackets, books, stockings, all very dusty and seemingly dropped in place randomly and abandoned. Off to one side of the unused bar, there was a long, unlit back hallway that led to a decrepit bathroom and a locked door. In the hallway was a low shelf with hundreds of pairs of shoes, all sizes, all ages, many of them tiny children's, mostly sneakers, neatly paired and stacked as though the owners had taken them off to go into a relative's home and then never returned. It was very uncanny and started to freak us out a little bit. When we took a peek with a flashlight in the old bathroom, the floor, walls, and toilet were all covered in a dark brownish red stains. The closer we got to the door at the end of the hall, the stronger the rotting smell got. We tested the knob quickly, nearly gagging, and found it locked. At that point, self-preservation finally cut through the morbid curiosity, and we took a step back to look at the mass of shoes, random toys, unidentifiable stains, and decomposition smell, and decided to nope on out of there with haste. I'm still not sure what was going on there, but I'm glad we left when we did. More puzzling than creepy, roads A and B, parallel to each other, led from my town to this little place where a friend of mine lived. She was 9 miles away. When I would go to visit, I took Road A and was there in under 15 minutes, home again in under 15 minutes. Road B, driving that same 9 miles took easily half an hour, and then some, to get to my friend's town. But I would be home again in under 15 minutes. Speed limits are the same, cars are the same, both roads are within eyeshot of each other, and there are no hills or hairpin turns. I mentioned how weird that was to some local old-timers. They shrugged and agreed that that's the way it was, so I knew it wasn't just my perception. I talked to some coworkers about the same deal. They too noticed it and thought it was odd, but shrugged. On the phone with my dad, I told him, and he laughed. "Oh, you found a fold." Apparently, he had also stumbled across places like that seemed to be further away than they actually were. Or was it the other way around? Dad called it a fold, as if it were paper or cloth, shorter when folded up and longer when unfolded. I've never heard that term from anyone else, but I have met a lot of people who have had similar experiences. In October of 1999, I was 6 years old, and I was on a long trip with my dad. We weren't really close to anything, but I had to pee, and he was looking for something to eat or drink, so we stopped at this small shack on the side of the road. Nothing else had been around for miles. I peed in the grass because it appeared nobody was at the little shack, when suddenly a man came out from behind the shack to say hello. My dad was talking to him for a bit about what we were up to and where we were headed. No idea why he would do this in hindsight. The guy says that he doesn't have any food or water, and that the shack is actually just a small haunted house that he runs every year. My dad says, "Oh, cool, let's check it out." I remember being very put off by it, and not wanting to check it out at all. My dad chalks it up to me being afraid to go into a haunted house. I was 6, and I could tell something was off. The guy running the shack says to hold on and let him get set up. I remember like 20 minutes going by, and still no word from the guy. So my dad puts me on his shoulders and starts to walk through. There was nothing inside that gave the impression of an intentional haunted house, and the guy was nowhere to be found. We walked through and came out the other end without seeing the guy. My dad was a little more concerned at this point and hurried me to the car, but he wouldn't let me turn around. I've always wondered what that was all about. My dad has never given me more information and just says things like, "Yeah, that was really weird." This still effing creeps me out now 10 plus years on. Deep in the desert, somewhere near Checo Canyon, New Mexico, my friends and I took a camping trip there to celebrate graduating high school. We had heard it was a common spot for UFO sightings, and we were mostly jokingly into the X-Files at the time, so we thought it would be a fun, silly adventure. It was a horrible trip for various reasons, and we left very early before the sun came up. The way into the campground was a long, straight dirt road that led back to the main highway and a large gas station after about 45 minutes of driving. It was completely pitch black, so we went fairly slowly. Even so, after about an hour, we were starting to wonder why it was taking so long to get back to the main highway. We pressed on and on. An hour turned into 2, and the road was still pitch black. It was like the only thing that existed was the 10 feet in front of our car illuminated by our headlights. Our phones had no service, but They and the car radio clocks all read 7:30 a.m. It was still pitch black outside. The moon was still high. There was no sign of sunrise at all. This was in early July, so sunrise should have definitely already happened. We were starting to get really freaked out when we saw a bunch of lights in the distance and immediately felt relief, thinking it was the gas station and the main highway. It was not. All of a sudden, the dirt road turned into smooth black pavement like brand new. The lights were from 2 rows of what looked like brand new houses, 2 rows of 6 houses. Each had the same floor plan, pristine, white, painted, all interior lights on but completely empty. No furniture, no people. Cars were parked in front of each identical house. No one is in sight, not a soul. There was a huge water tower behind the houses, but we couldn't read the lettering because it was so dark. It was just a massive black shadow. We briefly pulled over and thought about trying to find someone to ask for directions, but got a very creepy feeling, dipped the F out, and went back the way we came. Once we left the weird little miniature fake town, the sun finally came up and our phones got service again. The clocks still read 7:30, even though it had been at least an hour or 2. We made it back to the gas station and bought a map, trying to figure out what the town was that we had driven through. We even asked the gas station attendant if they knew anything about it, but by all accounts it didn't exist. There's no trace of it anywhere. Gas station staff looked at us like we were crazy. I got back in the car and drove home in dead silence. None of us speak anymore. I'll add mine. Please note, this was 20 plus years ago in Kansas. I'm stationed at Fort Riley, and we're new parents to an 8-month-old. There's not a lot to do around there if you're not a hunter or fisherman. I decided to run up to Topeka, as it has a mall. On the way up, my wife says, "Hey, baby's asleep. Why don't we do some scenic driving?" For those that don't know, Kansas is a very flat state. You can really see for miles on the highway. We're about 14 miles away from the post, according to what we can see. It looks to be this little township with houses laid out in a grid. The interesting part is that there's an old-style schoolhouse painted barn red, and partially burned, and not long ago, like it was in the last few weeks. As we drove around this little square of maybe 15 homes, this happened. Opened the front door, slammed the front door again and again. It was just a very random and creepy event. Disappearing restaurant, Dead Man Pass near Pendleton, Eastern Oregon, 2006. When my husband and I were dating, we initially lived 4 hours apart from each other. He brought me to stay with him for a month between the end of the job I did in the fall and the start of the spring semester at college. We stopped for lunch at this little non-chain restaurant with a clear view of the pass up the hills. As I remember it, it was somewhat near the truck stop and the Wild Horse Casino down there on the north side of the pass, but still basically in the middle of nowhere. Well, outside the outskirts of the city. I sat by my window and enjoyed watching the traffic on the pass as we ate. I think we were the only customers in the restaurant at the time. I tried twice over the next few years, once with my parents and once with my best friend, to find this place again. Each time we drove along all the roads near there, on both sides of the freeway, though I do clearly remember it being on the truck stop side, we looked even for a closed restaurant or something. There's no evidence this place has ever existed, but nothing. Both my dad and my best friend's reactions were quite chill. Basically, yeah, travel long enough and weird places and occurrences like that happen. My husband has never even remembered making the stop. Maybe it was actually on the south side of the pass near La Grande, looking back the way we'd just come, but in my memory, it was before we went over the pass, and I've never found any evidence of it there either. To be fair, I haven't looked terribly hard on that side either, but it also just doesn't look right from that side. My remembrance is probably off somehow, but it's just also clear in my memory.